populations are scattered across space. Some regions are heavily populated, others are not so heavily. The term population distribution refers to the way the people are spaced over the earth's surface. The 10 most populous countries of the world are, in order, China, India, US, Indonesia, Brazil, Pakistan, Russia, Bangladesh, Japan and Nigeria make up nearly 60% of the world's population. 6 of these 10 countries are in Asia. No individual country of Europe is among the 10 most populous countries of the world. On completion of this lesson, you should be able to know the distribution patterns of the population, understand the factors influencing the distribution of population and examine the factors responsible for uneven distribution of world population. The distribution of population is extremely uneven with marked contrast between vast areas of scanty population and highly crowded areas elsewhere. In fact, 80% of the population occupies less than 20% of land surface. The main points of contrast are between the old world and the new world. More than 90% of the world's population is found in the northern hemisphere and over 85% in the old world. These facts are, of course, partly due to the inequalities of land area in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere and in the old world and the new world. But even if one considers population densities rather than total numbers, the same essential contrasts are evident. As we can see that there are 3 primary concentration of outstandingly high population densities, which are usually over 100 persons per square kilometer, are evident on a world scale, namely Southeast Asia, Europe and Northeast North America. These 3 regions alone account for 70% of total world population. In Southeast Asia, more than 50% of the world population live on as little as 10% of the world's land area. In Europe, 11% of the world population occupy less than 5% of the land area, while a further 4% occupy the Atlantic fringe of North America. It is obvious that population numbers and densities decrease with altitude in response to the increasing difficulties involved in the settlement of high level environments. High altitude imposes physiological limits upon human existence through reduced atmospheric pressure and low oxygen content. Consequently, very few permanent settlements are found in the Andes and Himalayas about 5,500 meters, while La Paz, the capital of Bolivia, at a height of 3,640 meters, is the highest city in the world. The influence of altitude cannot, of course, be diverged from that of latitude. In low latitudes, high plateau areas provide positive advantages and are often favored for settlement on account of the climatic amelioration that they provide. Conversely, in high latitudes, areas of low ground are generally sought out by the scanty population of such areas. It is thus possible to refer to mountains that repel at mountains that attract. Similarly, altitude cannot be disassociated from the factor of relief as an influence upon population distribution. Steep gradients exposure and rugged terrain all tend to deter settlements by restricting movement and the possibilities of cultivation. Thus, an examination of population distribution maps will show that some of the most abrupt changes in population density occur at the junction of mountain and plain. However, within a planned areas, the pattern of valleys may have important effects. Will stop certain valley, provides lines of penetration and favor communication and settlement, while valleys remain isolated and sparsely populated. Similarly, under one densely populated plains, rivers may exert either a positive or a negative effect. Most attract settlements, especially at crossing points, confluences and the head of navigation, but others may be liable to flooding and later settlement. In the case of northern Canada and interior Australia, the presence of minerals has attracted small settlements far beyond the limits of the ecumen. It will appreciated that the influence of mineral and energy resources upon population depends on a whole range of related factors such as market demand, capital for development, availability of labor supply, presence of transportation links and cost of production. Indeed, all the physical influences outlined above should be evaluated in relation to the economic, social and political conditions in the concerned areas. It has already been implied that the density of population in a particular area depends to a large extent upon the type of scale of economic activity in that area. Technological and economic advances are usually associated with changes in population density and distribution. For example, the North American prairies presented different opportunities for the Indians with their hunting economy. The 19th century ranchers, the later settled agriculturists and the modern industrialists and largely urbanized society. Each stage in the economic development of the region involved a growth of numbers and substantial changes in the distribution pattern. The Industrial Revolution has been a particularly potent force for a change in many countries of the world. Pre-industrial agriculture population, often fairly unevenly distributed, were attracted to sources of energy, particularly coal field as well as lines of transport and communication and ports. Dense population concentrations replaced long established patterns of dispersal and generally even distribution. On the whole, it is true to say that increasing complexity and diversity of economic activities encourages unevenness of population distribution. In the present century, with increasing government control over economic activity, political influences have emerged as a significant factor affecting population patterns. In communist countries, common population may be directed to areas of social and economic need, while in the Western world, various inducements may be offered to encourage or assist migration to new towns, development areas or simply away from overcrowded conurbations. Political events have also been responsible throughout history for mass migration of population. Asia accounts for only 1/5 of the world land area, but supports more than half of the world's population. Europe, with only 1/25 of the world land mass, supports 1/9 of world population. The American land mass occupies 1/4 of the total world land, has only 1/7 share of world population. Africa, with its share of 1/4 of world's land surface, has only about 1/10 of the world population. Within the continents too, population distribution is uneven. China and India within Asia account for 2/3 of the continent's population and nearly 1/3 of that of the world. Far more people live in northern and western parts of Europe than in the southern and eastern parts. Large proportion of Africa and the Americas are practically uninhabited. Now, the question is, why this uneven distribution? So, if we study the geographical features governing population distribution, only 10% of the total population lives in the southern hemisphere and 90% lives in the northern hemisphere. That is, land area is much more in the northern hemisphere. Within the northern hemisphere, there are latitudinal differences. 10% of the total population live within the latitudes between 0 degrees to 20 degrees north, that is mainly Asia. 50% of the total lives between 20 to 40%, again mainly Asia, and 30% lives between 40 to 60 degree north, mainly Europe, while only 1% of the total population lives in the latitudes of 60 degree north and above. Nearly 2/3 of the total population live within 500 kilometers of sea and nearly 3/4 live within 1000 kilometers of the sea. This is because of the moderate climate closer to the sea and increased accessibility of such regions. The mean level of vertical distribution of population is the highest in South America with 644 meters above sea level, and the lowest in Australia with only 95 meters above sea level. Nearly 80% of the total population lives within 500 meters altitude above sea level. Within these broad parameters, it is to be seen that a variety of factors influence the density of population. High density is evident under diverse conditions. For instance, a traditional society in wet tropics, particularly in Java, a western industrialized society in mid latitudes like Belgium and Holland, and a riverine, arid and equatorial region, that is the Egypt. Broadly, high density is seen in the East Asia, South Asia, where it is mainly farm density, and in West Europe and Northeast America, where it is mainly due to high levels of urbanization. Thinly populated or uninhabited areas of the world include the dry lands, where lack of precipitation and non-feasibility of irrigation are limiting factors. Cold lands at the high latitudes, where frigid temperature precludes agriculture. Major mountain ranges and other mountainous areas with harsh climate and rugged terrain. Wet tropics with infertile soils due to heavy precipitation and high temperature, the remote areas and difficult environments. The unevenness in the distribution of world population may be attributed to the main factors: 1. Availability of arable land and water, 2. The age of civilization, 3. Accessibility of places, and 4. Restriction of national boundaries. Coming to the first one, the arable land, there is close relationship between the arable land and the concentration of population. The plain areas having fertile soils and suitable climate, that is temperature and rainfall, for the cultivation of crops are the regions of high density of population. Still, over 60% of the world population is dependent on agriculture for their livelihood. Consequently, the areas of intensive agriculture have high density of population. In other words, there is a positive correlation between the distribution of arable land and the distribution of the world's population. It is not only the plain areas where agriculture is possible, but man through his efforts has developed agriculture on terraces, on mountain sides. Example, Angami tribe near Kohima in Nagaland, etc. Heating greenhouse gases in cold climates, mainly in Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, etc. And irrigating deserts, mainly Nile Valley, Turkmenistan, and Jaisalmer and Bikaner district of Rajasthan, India, etc. Nevertheless, a comparison of the distribution of arable areas and population reveals several similarities. In the Great Plains of India and the Eastern Plains of China, there are high densities of population. Same is the case with the irrigated parts of Nile, Sir and Amu valleys, where irrigation allows farming in what are climatically deserts. Coming to the second one, age of civilization. The second most important factor which influences the growth, density and concentration of population is the age of civilization. Generally, the longer a place has been continuously used by farmers, the dense and large is the population. The eastern China plains and the Indo-Gangetic plains have long history of intensive agriculture and they have high densities of population. Contrary to this, the plains of Mississippi in USA, pampas of Argentina, down grasslands of Australia and New Zealand and velds of South Africa, though equally productive, there the cultivation was started only after the 17th century. Consequently, these areas are relatively sparsely populated. Coming to the third point, accessibility. Accessibility of places and regions is also a very important determinant of population growth and its distribution. In the agriculturally less productive but industrially advanced societies, the people are dependent on the secondary and tertiary sectors and most of the industries have been located at places which are easily accessible. Accessible places are those which are easily connected by transportation to many other places. The factor of accessibility is most important in an economy based on manufacturing and trading. The economic advantages of locations like Calcutta, Mumbai, Chennai, Karachi, Rotterdam, Chicago, Rome, Alexandria, Aden, Singapore and Tokyo create employment opportunities that attract large populations. These centers of dense population grow both by natural demographic increase and by producing the markets that generate even more economic opportunities for additional population. Consequently, these agglomerations where people have been engaged in industrial activities for several generations, mainly in Western Europe, tend to be densely populated. Restrictions of national boundaries. Each country has its international boundaries. Crossing of these boundaries by the people of one country to another country is not allowed by the provision of international law. Owing to this restriction, the people of overpopulated countries cannot enter the developed countries with less density of population. For example, Bangladesh has a large population density while Australia, Canada and USA have low density of population. In the absence of restriction of national boundaries, the population from Bangladesh could have migrated to USA, Canada and Australia to earn a better living. Such international migration is very limited, mainly because most nations do not allow a mass influx of new immigrants. Australia has an enormous resource potential, but it does not allow immigrants unless they are technically and educationally outstanding. In other words, political restriction to international migration of people is an important factor which helps to explain the existing distributional pattern of world population. Although major migrations have altered the pattern of the world's population in the past, such movements have been drastically curtailed in recent decades. Most governments restrict immigration and several countries control immigration as well. According to World Resources 97-98, the population of the world is about 6,000 millions, but what is more significant in relation to future food production is the rate of population growth that has characterized the post 1950 and which forms the basis for the exploration of global and inter-regional population growth rate into the 21st century. The figures also indicate that the most significant population increase has been in the developing nations, where some 75% of the world's population is now concentrated. Although global population growth rates are gradually declining and many nations, especially in the developed world, they have undergone a demographic transition from a state of growth to one population equilibrium. There are still 31 developing countries where population growth rates are in excess of 3% per annum. Most of these countries are in Africa, in which populations are expected to be doubled in less than 23 years. Elsewhere in the developing world, population growth rates are declining. In South America, the declines have been small, while in China, the population growth has halved in the last 2 decades. The life expectancy is below 40 years in Sierra Leone and Guinea and Gambia 40 years each. The average age in India and Pakistan is 62 and 64 years respectively, while it is 79 years in France, 77 years in Germany and 80 years in Japan. There are also striking variation in the population composition of the developing and the developed world. According to the estimated population of 1998, in the developed countries, only 20% of the population is in the under 15 age group and 14% in the over 65 age group, while in the developing countries 36% of the population is under the age of 15 and only 5% is aged over 60 years. Thus, improving health care coupled with high fertility rates and a large proportion of population entering their reproductive years provide an inbuilt momentum for future high population growth even if fertility rates decline. This means that the annual addition to the global population, which is currently 85 million people, will continue to increase. There are 17 countries in Europe in which more than 15% of the total population is over 65 years of age and only about 20% of their population is around or below 20 years of age. The names of these countries are Austria, Belgium, Bulgaria, Croatia, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, Greece, Hungary, Italy, Norway, Portugal, Spain, Sweden, Switzerland and the United Kingdom. Population geography is concerned with the study of demographic processes in an environmental context and the spatial variation in population density and distribution which result from these processes. Explanation of distribution patterns involves consideration of a complex combination of physical, socio-economic and historical influences. Various quantitative measures and statistical techniques have been developed to give precision to comparisons of distribution patterns and to enable changes in a single distribution to be accurately measured. Population distributions are never static. The present distribution of world population is quite different from that of 1800 and doubtless will be different from that of a century hence.